Welcome back to Mr. Midnight. Tonight I have 9 most disturbing true Alaskan horror stories for you. These come from normal people, boat captains, park rangers, mail carriers, who went to Alaska for work and encountered something terrifying. I pulled these from police reports and emergency calls that were kept quiet for years. Every single one really happened in Alaska's wilderness, where it's so cold and isolated that if something goes wrong, you're on your own. New to the channel? Subscribe for true scary stories every night. Hit the bell so you know when I upload. All right, let's get into it. 9 people went to Alaska just trying to make a living. They were driving trucks, flying helicopters, working construction. But what they found in that frozen wilderness still gives them nightmares. Grab something warm to drink and settle in. These stories will make you think twice about venturing into places where the sun disappears for months and help is impossibly far away. My name is Marcus Blackwater, and I've been operating ferry routes between Alaska's coastal towns for 17 years. Started right out of high school on my uncle's boat, learned every inlet and channel from Ketchikan to Dutch Harbor. I've seen storms that could flip a house, rescued stranded fishermen from ice floes, and carried everything from wedding parties to body bags across these dark waters. The Coast Guard calls me when they need someone who knows these waters like his own backyard. But what happened last month between Sitka and Juneau changed everything I thought I knew about what lives beneath these waves. I learned that some Tlingit legends aren't just stories, they're warnings. I run the Northern Passage, a 78-foot passenger ferry that seats 42 people. She's got twin diesel engines, satellite navigation, and enough safety equipment to handle anything the Gulf of Alaska throws at us. My route covers the smaller communities where the big ferries don't go. Places like Angoon, Tenaki Springs, and the logging camps on Chichagof Island. Most days it's locals heading to Juneau for supplies or medical appointments, with the occasional tourist wanting the authentic Alaska experience. Growing up here, you hear the old stories. My grandmother was half Tlingit, and she told me about the Kushtaka when I was maybe 8 years old. Shapeshifters, she called them. Otter spirits that could look like people, lure you into the water, then drag you down and steal your soul. The elders say they can take the form of anyone who's drowned, using their memories to trick new victims. I always figured it was just folklore, something to keep kids away from dangerous water. Then bodies started showing up along my regular routes. First one washed up near Hoona in early September. Coast Guard said it was probably a fishing accident. Guy went overboard, drowned, got chewed up by the current. But I saw the body when they pulled it out. Deep claw marks on his arms and chest, like something with webbed hands had grabbed him. His eyes were gone, sockets clean as if something had plucked them out neat and careful. The medical examiner said his lungs were full of salt water, but mixed with blood like he'd been bleeding internally while he drowned. 3 more bodies turned up over the next month, all along my route. Same pattern every time, claw marks, missing eyes, bloody seawater in their lungs. The victims were all people I'd carried on my ferry at some point. That should have been my first real warning, but I told myself it was just coincidence. Small communities, everyone uses the ferry eventually. October was brutal that year. Constant rain, rough seas, fog so thick you couldn't see your own bow. I was running behind schedule on a Tuesday morning when I got a radio call from a hiker stranded on Baranof Island. Said her name was Sarah Chen, been camping alone for 2 weeks, and her boat had engine trouble. She was at the old logging camp dock, needed pickup to Juneau for a medical appointment. I found her waiting on the dock in the rain, but something felt off immediately. She was wearing jeans and a light jacket, should have been soaked through after standing in that downpour for who knows how long, but her clothes were completely dry. Not damp, not recently dried, bone dry like she'd been standing under cover the whole time. Sarah seemed normal enough when she came aboard. Asian woman, maybe 35, friendly smile, paid cash for her ticket. She took a seat near the window and started chatting with the other passengers. An elderly couple from Sitka, a construction worker heading to Juneau, and Frank Morrison, an old-timer I'd been carrying for years. Frank was going to visit his wife's grave on her birthday, something he did every year since she died. But Sarah kept staring out at the water with this look on her face, not peaceful or thoughtful, hungry, like she was watching for something. And when she smiled at the other passengers, I noticed her teeth looked different, sharper than normal, more pointed. About an hour into the trip, Sarah started telling Frank about his wife, detailed stories about conversations they'd had, places they'd visited together. At first, Frank seemed pleased that someone was interested, but then his face went pale. Sarah was describing private moments, things Frank had never told anyone. She talked about arguments they'd had, secret fears his wife had shared with him, even what she'd whispered to him on her deathbed. "How do you know all that?" Frank asked, his voice shaking. Sarah just laughed. "I was there, listening from the water. Your wife told me everything while she was floating." That's when I noticed her skin. Under the cabin lights, it had this weird texture, like it was constantly wet, even though she was dry. When she touched the armrest of her seat, she left behind a slimy handprint that didn't evaporate. The other passengers started acting strange. The elderly couple got up and walked to the railing, staring down at the waves like they were hypnotized. The construction worker followed them, all three of them leaning forward like they wanted to jump overboard. And Sarah was making these clicking sounds under her breath, like she was talking to something in the water around us. Frank suddenly stood up and climbed over the safety rail. "Mary's calling me," he said, tears streaming down his face. "She says the water will heal all my pain, that we can be together again." I grabbed Frank and pulled him back, but Sarah was right there, encouraging him to jump. "Go to her," she whispered. "The cold water will wash away all your sadness. She's waiting for you down there with all the others." That's when I saw Sarah's reflection in the cabin window. It wasn't human. The reflection showed a sleek, otter-like creature covered in dark fur with massive claws and intelligent, predatory eyes. Its mouth was full of needle-sharp teeth, and its body moved with fluid grace, even while Sarah's human form stood perfectly still. Sarah noticed me staring at the window. Her human disguise started slipping, patches of wet fur appearing on her arms and face. Her fingers stretched into webbed claws, and her eyes went completely black. "You can see me," she said, but her voice had changed. It was Frank's wife now, speaking in Mary Morrison's exact tone. "I've been so lonely down there, Marcus. All those people you carry back and forth, they keep me company now. Would you like to see them?" Sarah grabbed Frank with her clawed hands and started dragging him toward the water. She moved impossibly fast, and her skin was so slippery I couldn't get a grip on her. Frank screamed as she pulled him overboard, but the sound cut off the instant they hit the freezing water. I threw life preservers and called Mayday, but when the Coast Guard arrived 30 minutes later, they found nothing. No trace of Frank or Sarah. The search team did recover Frank's eyes floating on the surface, perfectly preserved but turned completely white like cataracts had formed instantly. The official report said Frank Morrison fell overboard and drowned. No mention of Sarah Chen because according to the passenger manifest and security cameras, she had never existed. But I knew what I'd seen. I started researching ferry accidents along my route, and the pattern became clear. Every drowning victim from the past year, 37 people total, had been traveling alone when they disappeared. Isolated passengers with no one to verify their stories or check on them. Sarah, or whatever she really was, had been hunting along the ferry routes for months. She could perfectly mimic anyone she'd consumed, stealing their memories and using them to gain other victims' knowledge. Rust. The worst part was when I started recognizing passengers. People I'd carried before who had supposedly drowned were climbing aboard my ferry again, wearing different faces but with the same hungry stare Sarah had. I'd see a construction worker who'd fallen overboard in July, now disguised as a tourist. A fisherman who'd drowned near Angoon was back as a traveling salesman. All of them Sarah, wearing stolen faces like masks. I reported everything to the Coast Guard, the Alaska State Troopers, even tried to contact Tlingit elders about traditional ways to deal with kushtaka. Nobody believed me. They said stress and isolation were making me paranoid, that I needed to take some time off, but I can't stop working these waters. These communities depend on the ferry service, and someone has to warn people about what's hunting out there. I've modified my safety procedures. No single passengers after dark, mandatory buddy system for anyone traveling alone. And I keep a spotlight trained on the water at all times. Sarah's still out there. I see her constantly now, sometimes as different passengers, sometimes swimming alongside the boat just under the surface. She's collected dozens of faces and memories, becoming more dangerous with each victim. The scariest part is that I can never tell which passengers are real people and which ones are just Sarah wearing stolen faces. Last week, a woman who looked exactly like my ex-wife tried to board the ferry. She knew private details about our relationship, things only the real Jennifer would remember. But her clothes were dry despite the rain, and when she smiled, her teeth were too sharp. I turned the boat around and headed straight back to port. The kushtaka is still hunting, still feeding, still growing stronger with each soul she steals. And every passenger who steps onto my ferry could be her next victim, or could be her, wearing the face of someone she's already taken. If you ever find yourself on a small ferry in southeast Alaska, watch the other passengers carefully. If their clothes stay dry in the rain, if they know things they shouldn't know, if their reflection doesn't match their face, get off at the next stop and don't look back. Because once the kushtaka notices you, she'll follow you into the deepest, darkest waters where no one can hear you scream. My name is Marcus Thompson, and I've been a park ranger at Denali National Park for 16 years. I started here right after college, drawn by the wild beauty of Alaska and the chance to protect one of America's last true wildernesses. Over the years, I've handled everything from tourist emergencies to wildlife attacks, search and rescue operations, and even helped investigate a few suspicious deaths. I know this land better than most people know their own backyard. But what happened last winter changed everything I thought I knew about the creatures that call this place home. What I discovered hunting in my park wasn't supposed to exist. When I first took this job, my supervisor warned me about the isolation. Denali covers over 6 million acres, and during winter months, some areas go weeks without human contact. My patrol route covers the northern section, including Wonder Lake and the remote backcountry trails that only experienced hikers attempt. I drive a modified Ford F-350 equipped with emergency medical supplies, communication equipment, GPS tracking, and enough survival gear to last a week in sub-zero conditions. My daily routine includes checking trail conditions, monitoring wildlife activity, maintaining emergency shelters, and documenting any unusual incidents for the Park Service database. The winter of 2023 started normal enough. October brought the first heavy snow, and by November, most of the park was locked in that deep, silent cold that makes every sound carry for miles. I was doing my regular patrols, checking the automated weather stations and making sure the emergency supply caches were stocked. That's when I started noticing something was wrong with the wildlife. It began with the caribou. Denali's caribou herds migrate through specific routes that haven't changed in decades. I know these patterns like clockwork, where they graze, where they wash their warriors, aider, where they shelter during storms. But in early December, I found an entire herd slaughtered near Wonder Lake. 37 caribou scattered across maybe 2 acres of snow that looked like a battlefield painted in red. I've seen wolf kills before. I've seen bear attacks, even wolverine damage. This wasn't like any of those. Wolves usually take the weakest animal and leave the rest of the herd alone. Bears kill messily, focused on getting food fast. This was different. Strategic. The caribou had been driven into a natural bowl between 2 ridges where they couldn't escape, then systematically torn apart. The kill patterns showed coordination. Some animals attacked from the front while others hit from behind, all at the same time. What really bothered me was the tracks. At first glance, they looked like wolf prints, but something was off. They were bigger than any wolf I'd seen, and the shape was wrong. Wolf paws are oval with clear claw marks. These tracks showed what looked like fingers. Actual fingers with opposable thumbs, but ending in razor-sharp claws that left gouges in the frozen ground. I took photos and measurements, then called it in to my supervisor, Janet Reeves. She's been with the Park Service for 25 years and has seen everything. When I described the scene, she went quiet for a long moment. Then she told me something I'll never forget. She said the Inuit elders who worked with the park in the early days had stories about creatures called adlet, half-human, half-wolf beings that hunted in packs. According to the legends, they had human intelligence but wolf instincts, and they could work together in ways that made them more dangerous than either species alone. At the time, I figured she was just trying to ease the tension with old folklore. I documented the incident and moved on. But over the next few weeks, I kept finding more slaughter. Red animals, moose, deer, even a few black bears, all killed with that same surgical precision, all showing signs of coordinated pack hunting. The attacks were getting closer to the main tourist areas. By mid-December, I was finding kill sites within 5 miles of the visitor center. Whatever was doing this was getting bolder, and it was learning. Each new scene showed more sophisticated hunting tactics. The creatures were using the terrain better, setting up ambushes, even creating barriers to channel prey exactly where they wanted them. Then came the call that changed everything. On December 18th, my radio crackled to life at 2:47 a.m. A family camping near Wonder Lake had missed their scheduled check-in. The Hendersons, Paul and Marie, with their 8-year-old son Tyler. They were experienced winter campers with proper permits and equipment. Paul was a former Army Ranger who knew wilderness survival better than most of my colleagues. I suited up and drove out to their campsite following GPS coordinates they'd provided when they registered. The drive took 45 minutes on the snow-packed access road, my headlights cutting through the darkness while my radio hissed with static. I kept trying to raise them on their emergency frequency, but got nothing but dead air. Their campsite looked like a slaughterhouse. The tent was shredded, sleeping bags torn open with down feathers scattered everywhere. Dark stains covered the snow in patterns that made my stomach turn. But the worst part was the tracks. Dozens of them, circling the campsite in perfect formation, then leading away in 3 different directions, like the pack had split up to carry their prey. I followed the main trail, my flashlight beam picking out drag marks and blood drops in the snow. The tracks led me deeper into the wilderness, away from any marked trails or emergency shelters. After about 2 miles, I found Paul Henderson's arm, still wearing his watch and wedding ring. It had been torn off at the shoulder with what looked like surgical precision. The next mile brought more pieces. And Marie's leg, still in her hiking boot, Paul's torso opened up and emptied out like someone had been selecting specific organs. The creatures had eaten the heart, liver, and kidneys from each victim, but left everything else to freeze in the snow. It wasn't feeding behavior, it was ritual. 3 miles from the campsite, I found a cave opening that I'd never seen before, even though I'd patrolled this area for 16 years. The entrance was partially hidden by fallen rocks, but I could see scratch marks around the opening, the same claw marks I'd been finding at the kill sites. My radio was getting nothing but static, but I had a job to do. I pulled out my service weapon and my backup flashlight, then squeezed through the opening. The cave went back much further than I expected, opening into a series of connected chambers. My flashlight beam picked out bones scattered everywhere, human bones, animal bones, all arranged in patterns that looked almost like writing. The walls were covered in scratch marks that formed crude drawings of stick figures being chased and torn apart by larger shapes with 4 legs and elongated heads. But it was the sound that made my blood freeze. Somewhere deeper in the cave system, I could hear crying. A child's voice, weak but definitely alive. I followed the sound through 2 more chambers until I found Tyler Henderson in a natural alcove near the back of the cave. He was alive, but barely. Both legs were gone below the knee, and his left arm was missing from the elbow down. The wounds had been cauterized, burned shut to keep him from bleeding to death. Someone or something had been keeping him alive on purpose. Tyler's eyes were wide with terror, but he was conscious. When he saw my park ranger uniform, he started crying with relief. I immediately called for medical evacuation on my radio, but all I got was that same static. I tried my cell phone, my emergency beacon, even my backup radio. Nothing was getting through. "Ranger," Tyler whispered, his voice so quiet I had to lean in to hear him. "They're coming back, the wolf people. They said they were saving me for last because kids taste better when they're scared." I gathered Tyler in my arms and started moving toward the cave entrance. He weighed almost nothing. Whatever had been done to him, he'd lost a lot of blood. As we moved through the chambers, he told me about the creatures that had taken his family. "They walk like people," he said, his voice getting weaker, "but they're covered in fur with long faces full of teeth, and they can talk. They used Mom's voice to call me out of the tent, then Dad's voice to tell me everything would be okay while they ate him." The boy described creatures that stood upright like humans, but had the heads and claws of wolves. They could speak in perfect human voices, imitating anyone they'd heard. The pack leader wore Paul Henderson's scalp like a hat and would put on Marie's voice to comfort Tyler before taking another small bite from his arms or legs. When we reached the cave entrance, I could see my truck in the distance, but as I stepped outside, I realized we were surrounded. Glowing eyes reflected my flashlight beam from every direction, dozens of them positioned in a perfect circle around the cave entrance. They'd been waiting for me to come out. I managed to fire off 3 emergency flares, the red light flooding the area and revealing shapes that made my sanity crack. They looked exactly like Tyler had described. Human bodies covered in thick fur with wolf heads full of human-like teeth. They walked upright but could drop to all fours and move with impossible speed. The pack leader was wearing Paul Henderson's scalp, and when it spoke, it used Marie's voice. "Thank you for bringing our meal back to us," it said in Marie's exact tone. "We were getting hungry." The flares gave me just enough light to reach my truck. I laid Tyler in the passenger seat and gunned the en bois, Jean, crashing through the circle of creatures and racing toward the main road. In my rear-view mirror, I could see them following us, running on 2 legs at speeds that should have been impossible. I made it to the hospital in Anchorage, but during the helicopter ride, something started happening to Tyler. His remaining arm began growing thick black hair. His face started stretching forward into a muzzle. The adlet bite was infectious, and the transformation was already starting. By the time we landed, Tyler had grown claws and fangs. His eyes had turned yellow, and when he looked at the medical team, I could see nothing human left behind them. He killed 3 nurses and a doctor before escaping through a window and disappearing into the wilderness around the city. Over the next month, hikers and campers started disappearing all across southern Alaska. Each scene showed the same coordinated pack hunting, the same ritualistic feeding patterns. But now there were new tracks mixed in with the old ones, smaller prints that looked like they came from recently transformed humans. The creatures weren't just hunting anymore, they were recruiting. I tracked down 5 people who'd survived adlet attacks but had been bitten during their escapes. I found them hiding in remote cabins, all in different stages of transformation. Each one begged me to kill them before they fully changed, but I could see the predatory intelligence already growing in their eyes. Sarah Mitchell had been a teacher from Fairbanks. When I found her, she still looked mostly human, but her teeth had grown into fangs, and her fingernails had become claws. She described the mental change as the worst part. "I can feel my compassion dying," she told me, tears streaming down her face. "Every day I care less about other people and more about the smell of their blood. I know what I'm becoming, but I can't stop it. Soon I won't even want to." The transformation was irreversible once it started. The human personality would be completely consumed by the wolf nature within a few weeks. The pack was deliberately creating new members, building an army of intelligent predators to expand their hunting grounds. I finally tracked their main den to a series of caves in the Alaska Range, about 60 miles north of my original patrol area. The caves were filled with human bones arranged in spiral patterns that hurt to look at. Deeper in the system, I found dozens of cocoon-like structures made from animal hide and human hair. Inside each one was a person in the middle of transformation, suspended in some kind of fluid that kept them alive during the change. The creatures were perfecting their process, keeping victims conscious throughout the transformation so they could feed on their terror and despair. When I tried to call for backup, my radio picked up howls that sounded like human screams mixed with wolf calls. The pack had learned to jam our communications, using their voices to create interference on our frequencies. They surrounded me in the caves, dozens of glowing eyes calculating the best way to take me alive. I could see the pack leaders studying me, wearing what looked like pieces of clothing from different victims. It spoke in my own supervisor's voice, perfectly mimicking Janet's tone and speech patterns. "Marcus, you've done excellent work," it said. "Now it's time for your reward." I managed to escape using my last emergency flares and a knowledge of cave systems I'd developed over years of rescue operations. But I know they're still out there, growing their numbers every winter, learning more about human behavior with each new victim they transform. Now I patrol with silver bullets loaded in my service weapon, though I'm not even sure they'll work. The Park Service officially lists all the missing people as lost to exposure or animal attacks. But I know the truth. Somewhere in my park, an intelligent pack of predators is hunting tourists and systematic ally, creating more of their kind. And every winter, when the snow gets deep and the nights get long, I can hear them howling in voices that sound almost human. My name is Jake Morrison, and I've been flying helicopters in Alaska for 15 years. I got my pilot's license right out of high school and spent 2 years learning to fly in terrible weather conditions. I've done search and rescue missions, medical evacuations, and supply drops to places so remote they don't show up on most maps. I've flown through blizzards that would ground commercial airlines and landed on mountain peaks where one wrong move means a 1,000-foot drop. But what happened last summer at Lake Iliamna changed everything I thought I knew about what lives in Alaska's deep waters. Some things should stay buried in the depths where they belong. I work for Northern Alaska Aviation, doing supply runs to mining operations across the interior. These jobs pay well because they're dangerous, flying heavy loads to temporary landing sites, often in weather that keeps other pilots grounded. The mining companies need their equipment and supplies no matter what Mother Nature throws at us. I've been doing this route for 8 years, and I know every mountain peak, every river bend, and every safe landing spot between Anchorage and the Arctic Circle. The Copper Ridge mining operation sat on the north shore of Lake Iliamna, Alaska's largest lake. It's a massive body of water, over 70 miles long and 20 miles wide in some places. The lake is so deep that nobody has ever found the bottom in the center sections. Local fishing guides say it drops over 2,000 feet, but that's just a guess. The water stays cold even in summer, and thick fog rolls off the surface most mornings. I'd been flying supplies to Copper Ridge for 3 months. It was a 20-person crew working a new copper deposit they'd found under the lake bed. The operation was bigger than most. They had underwater drilling equipment and were using controlled explosives to clear obstacles on Lake Bottom. The site supervisor, a guy named Bill Henderson, always complained about the noise regulations. He said the environmental groups were making their job harder by limiting when they could blast. The workers lived in temporary housing units about 50 yards from the shore. It wasn't luxury, but it was comfortable enough for the 6-month contract most of these guys were working. The pay was good, double what they'd make in the lower 48, and most were planning to go home with enough money to buy houses or pay off debts. I remember thinking the setup looked too close to the water. Most mining operations I'd seen kept their living quarters farther from any bodies of water, especially in Alaska where flash flooding is common. But Henderson said they needed to be close to monitor the underwater equipment. They had sensors and communication cables running from the housing units right down into the lake. Everything seemed normal until that emergency call came in on July 18th at 2:47 a.m. I was asleep in my apartment in Anchorage when my satellite phone started buzzing. The voice on the other end was panicked, talking so fast I could barely understand him. He said he was calling from Copper Ridge, and they needed immediate evacuation. Multiple people were missing, and something was coming out of the lake. I told him to slow down and explain what kind of emergency this was. Industrial accidents happen all the time at mining sites. Maybe there had been an explosion or a collapse, but he kept saying the same thing over and over. Something was taking people from the shore and dragging them into the water. The way his voice shook made my skin crawl. I threw on my flight gear and headed to the airfield. The weather report showed clear skies and light winds, perfect flying conditions. But as I started up my Bell 412, something felt wrong. The radio was full of static, and I couldn't reach the Copper Ridge site on any frequency. That should have been my first warning that this wasn't a normal rescue operation. The flight to Lake Iliamna usually takes 90 minutes, but I pushed the engine harder than normal. If people were in real danger, every minute counted. As I flew over the mountains, I kept trying to radio the mining site, but got nothing except dead air and interference. My GPS was working fine, but my communications equipment was acting up in ways I'd never seen before. When I reached the lake, I could see the mining operation from 5 miles away, but something was wrong with the picture. The normal work lights were off, and only emergency lighting was running. No machinery was operating, and I couldn't see anyone moving around the site. The place looked abandoned, but there should have been 20 people down there. I circled the site twice before landing. My helicopter's downwash scattered loose equipment and tarps, but I didn't see any people coming out to meet me. That was strange. When a helicopter arrives at a remote site, everyone usually comes out to see what's happening. The silence was making me nervous. I sat down on the normal landing pad and shut down the engine. The sudden quiet was unsettling. No generators running, no voices, no equipment noise, just the sound of small waves lapping against the shore. I grabbed my radio and tried calling out, but heard nothing except my own echo coming back from the mountains. Walking toward the housing units, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. There were dark stains on the ground leading from the dormitories straight down to the water's edge. The stains looked fresh, and they were too dark to be motor oil or drilling mud. Whatever had made these marks was sticky and thick. I followed the trail to the water and found deep gouges in the concrete foundation of the nearest housing unit. The gouges were arranged in groups of 3, like massive claws had scraped through the concrete as easily as dragging fingernails through sand. Each mark was over a foot long and carved several inches deep. No construction equipment I knew could make marks like that. That's when I heard a voice calling from the equipment shed. "Help! Is someone out there? Please help us!" It sounded like a man, probably middle-aged, and he was shouting like his life depended on it. I ran toward the shed and found 6 people barricaded inside with welding equipment pushed against the door. The survivors looked like they hadn't slept in days. Their clothes were torn and dirty, and they kept glancing toward the water every few seconds. Bill Henderson was among them, but he looked 20 years older than when I'd seen him 3 weeks earlier. His hands shook as he tried to light a cigarette. "We've been waiting for you," Henderson said. "We called for evacuation 4 days ago, but our radio equipment keeps failing. Something's been hunting us. It comes out of the lake at night and takes people." I asked him to explain what he meant by something. Henderson and the others started talking all at once, describing a creature unlike anything in the wildlife manuals. They said it was massive, easily 200 feet long, with multiple heads and arms that could reach over 100 feet from the water's edge. "It's smart," said Maria Santos, the site's geologist. "It learns our voices and mimics them to lure people outside. We've heard our missing coworkers calling for help from the water, but when someone goes to investigate, these arms shoot out of the lake and grab them." She showed me security footage on a battery-powered tablet. The timestamp showed 3 nights earlier, around midnight. A man I recognized as Tommy Chen, one of the drillers, was walking toward the shore after hearing someone call his name. The video quality was poor, but I could see massive tentacle-like appendages erupting from the water and wrapping around Tommy's bod. The arms were covered in what looked like suction cups, but lined with rows of backward-facing teeth. The creature dragged Tommy into the water so fast he didn't have time to scream, but the most disturbing part was what happened next. About 10 minutes later, we could hear Tommy's voice coming from the lake, calling for help and begging someone to come get him. The survivors said this went on for hours, Tommy's voice getting weaker and more desperate until it finally stopped just before dawn. "It was testing him," Henderson explained. "Tasting him. We found pieces of him washed up on shore the next morning, but they looked like they'd been partially digested and then spit back out. This thing doesn't just kill, it experiments with its food." I've seen a lot of disturbing things in 15 years of flying rescue missions, but nothing had prepared me for what these people were describing. According to local Aleut legends, This was a tizuruk, an ancient lake monster that had been sleeping in the deepest parts of Lake Iliamna for centuries. The underwater blasting had apparently woken something that should have stayed buried. "We tried fighting back," said Pete Williams, the demolitions expert. "Used some of our mining explosives and dropped them right where we saw the creature surface. But the blasts just made it angry. Its hide is too thick, and now it's more aggressive than before." As Pete was talking, I heard something that made my blood freeze. It was a voice coming from the direction of the lake, clear as day. "Jake Morrison. Jake, we need help out here. The helicopter pilot. Jake Morrison, please come help us." It was my own voice calling to me from the water. The creature had somehow learned my name and was perfectly mimicking my speech patterns. The survivors looked at me with terror in their eyes. "That's how it works," Henderson whispered. "It listens to us talk, then uses our voices against us." I knew we had to get out of there immediately. I told everyone to stay together and move quickly to my helicopter. No matter what they heard, even if it sounded like their own family members calling for help, they should not stop or look toward the water. We had one chance to escape, and it depended on reaching the aircraft before the creature realized we were making a run for it. As we moved across the open ground, the lake started bubbling like a massive pot of water coming to boil. Something huge was rising from the depths, and I could see multiple shapes breaking the surface. Long, serpentine necks emerged from the water, at least 6 of them, each one thick as a tree trunk with heads like prehistoric crocodiles. The heads moved independently but seemed to communicate with each other. All 6 sets of eyes focused on our group with an intelligence that made my skin crawl. This wasn't just a mindless predator. It was studying us, calculating our movements, planning its attack. I got everyone into the helicopter and started the engine as fast as possible. But as the rotors began spinning, one of the creature's heads shot out of the water like a missile. The jaws were easily large enough to crush a car, and they snapped shut just inches from my landing skid. If I had been 3 seconds slower getting airborne, we all would have been dead. As we lifted off, I saw the creature's full body for the first time. It was impossibly huge, over 200 feet long, covered in scales that reflected the sunlight like armor plating. Along the length of its body were dozens of limbs, some ending in massive claws, others more like tentacles with those horrifying toothed suction cups. The thing was built like the ultimate predator, fast enough to catch anything that tried to escape, strong enough to crush heavy equipment, and smart enough to use psychological warfare against its prey. During the flight back to Anchorage, Maria told me the creature had been collecting bodies in underwater caves. They'd seen lightsmiths moving beneath the surface at night, like the monster was arranging its prey collection. Copper Ridge Mining abandoned the site immediately. The company reported it as an environmental hazard and sealed all the access roads. But I started hearing similar reports from other mining operations across Alaska. It seemed like industrial activity was waking up ancient predators that had been sleeping in deep lakes for thousands of years. I've flown over dozens of remote lakes since that day, and sometimes I see massive shapes moving in the deep water. The tizuruk at Lake Iliamna wasn't unique. There are others out there, sleeping in Alaska's deepest lakes, waiting for someone to disturb their rest. Native communities have been avoiding these lakes for generations. They knew something dangerous lived in the depths, something that saw humans as nothing more than easy prey. But we ignored their warnings, and now we've awakened predators from another era. Last month, I got another emergency call from a different lake. The survivors described the exact same creature, the exact same hunting patterns. The tizuruks are either spreading to new territories, or maybe they were always there, and we're just now encountering them as we push deeper into Alaska's wilderness. I refuse to fly over deep water anymore. Sometimes I see lights moving under the ice in winter, and I know these creatures are still active, still hunting, still collecting their prey in underwater caves. Alaska's lakes aren't safe anymore. There are things in the deep water that have been waiting centuries for their next meal. And the worst part is knowing that every blast from a mining operation, every deep drilling project, every industrial disturbance might wake up another one. We're not just mining for copper and gold anymore. We're mining for monsters that should have stayed buried in the depths where they belong. My name is Marcus Tutu, and I've been fishing the waters around Igloolik for 23 years. My father taught me these waters when I was 12, just like his father taught him. I know every current, every reef, every safe harbor from here to Baffin Bay. I've pulled nets through ice storms that could freeze a man solid in minutes, and I've seen the ocean do things that would make grown men weep. But what happened last spring changed everything I thought I knew about what lives beneath our waters. Some things down there aren't meant to come up. The fishing had been good that year, really good. The Arctic char were running thick, and even the old-timers were saying it was the best season they'd seen in decades. Our little village of 300 people was actually making money for once, enough to fix the school roof and maybe even get better internet. I was working my boat, the Siku, a 30-foot vessel my grandfather built with his own hands back in 1987. She's not pretty, but she knows these waters better than any GPS system ever could. That morning started like any other. I checked my nets at dawn the way I always do. The radio crackled with the usual chatter from the other boats, weather reports, fish counts, complaints about equipment. The water was calm, almost mirror-like, which was unusual for early May. Usually there's still ice chunks floating around, but that year the thaw came early and stayed. I was checking my second net when I heard it for the first time. Singing. Clear as day, coming from somewhere near the shore. At first I thought it was one of the kids playing on the beach, but when I looked through my binoculars, the shore was empty. The voice was beautiful, though, speaking perfect Inuktitut, singing one of those old lullabies my grandmother used to hum when she was cooking. "Ma-mama, ma-mama, come to the water, ma-mama." The song made my chest feel tight, like when you're homesick, but you're already home. I found myself turning the boat toward shore, toward that voice, without really thinking about it. It wasn't until my hull scraped against the gravel that I snapped out of it. I'd driven right up onto the beach like some rookie who'd never seen the ocean before. I backed the Siku into deeper water and tried to focus on my nets, but I couldn't shake that voice. It had sounded so familiar, so comforting, like every good memory I'd ever had wrapped up in a song. That afternoon, when I brought my catch to the dock, I mentioned it to Tommy Kanguk's father, William. He was loading his truck with supplies, getting ready for the spring hunting season. "You hear any kids playing by the North Shore this morning?" I asked him. William shook his head. "Kids are all in school. Why?" "Nothing. Just thought I heard singing." William's face went serious. He glanced around to make sure nobody else was listening, then stepped closer. "My grandfather used to tell stories about singers in the water. Said they only come around when they're hunting." "Hunting for what?" "Children," he said quietly. "But those are just stories. Old superstitions to keep kids away from dangerous water." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing that voice, that perfect Inuktitut lullaby. It felt like someone was calling me, specifically me, to come back to the water. I got up around midnight and walked down to the harbor. The moon was full, turning the water silver, and everything was quiet except for the gentle lap of waves against the hulls of the fishing boats. Then I saw her. At first, I thought it was a woman who'd fallen overboard. She was floating about 50 yards from shore, her long black hair spreading around her like seaweed. I was about to call out to ask if she needed help when she raised her head and looked directly at me. Her eyes reflected the moonlight like an animal's. Her skin had a greenish tint that could have been the water, but even from that distance I could tell something was wrong with her face. Too long, too narrow, and when she smiled, I saw too many teeth. She started singing again, the same lullaby, but this time I could see her mouth moving. Her voice carried across the water like it was coming through speakers, clear and perfect and impossible. "Ma-mama, ma-mama, come to the water." I wanted to walk into that water. Every instinct in my body was telling me to wade out to her, to let her sing to me up close. My feet were already moving toward the water's edge when I heard a splash behind me. "Dad? Dad, what are you doing?" I spun around. My 16-year-old son, Jamie, was standing at the end of the dock in his pajamas, looking scared. I heard singing, I said, feeling stupid. I thought someone needed help. When I looked back at the water, she was gone. Dad, there's nobody there. You were walking right into the water. If I hadn't called out... I realized I was standing knee-deep in the harbor, my boots full of ice-cold water, with no memory of walking in. Jamie helped me back to shore, and I spent the rest of the night wondering what the hell had just happened to me. The next morning, Tommy Konguk didn't show up for school. His mother, Sarah, came to the harbor around noon asking if anyone had seen him. He'd left for school that morning like always, but the teacher said he never arrived. We organized a search party immediately. In a village our size, when a kid goes missing, everyone drops everything. We searched for 6 hours. The whole coastline, the old buildings, even the abandoned weather station up on the hill. Nothing. It was like Tommy had just vanished into thin air. That evening, when we were calling off the search until morning, old Peter Yuki pulled me aside. Peter was 78 and had been fishing these waters longer than anyone alive. "You were at the harbor last night," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yeah, I heard Sess, Inging." Peter nodded grimly. "My great-grandmother saw one once, called it kalupalik. Said they looked like women from far away, but up close." He shook his head. "They wear old-style clothing, traditional Amaudi that look like they've been underwater for centuries, and they steal children." "Peter, that's just..." "She heard Tommy calling for help last night, around midnight, from the water." My blood went cold. "That's impossible. We searched all day. If he'd fallen in..." "Not from the surface," Peter said. "From underneath. Deep underneath." We called in the Coast Guard. They brought diving equipment and sonar, professional search and rescue teams from Iqaluit. For 3 days, they searched every inch of the harbor and the coastline. They found nothing. Not a piece of clothing, not a shoe, nothing. But on the third night, we heard them. I was on my boat, anchored near where I'd seen the woman, when the sound started. Children's voices calling for help in Inuktitut. Faint, like they were very far away, but definitely coming from below the water. "Atata! Anana! Help us!" The voices were desperate, terrified. I called the Coast Guard on the radio, but by the time they got there, the voices had stopped. They said their underwater microphones hadn't picked up anything, but I know what I heard. We all did. Over the next week, the voices came every night, always around midnight, always from different spots along the coast. Sometimes we could hear specific children calling their parents by name. Sarah Konguk stood on the dock, crying every night, listening to what sounded like Tommy begging for help from somewhere far below the ice. The Coast Guard left after finding nothing. They said the ocean plays tricks on people's ears, that we were hearing whale songs or ice shifting. But whales don't speak Inuktitut, and ice doesn't know your mother's name. The really awful part, Wolu, is what we started seeing during the day. Faces pressed against the ice from below. Pale, distorted faces of children we recognized, trapped under the frozen surface like they were swimming, in some underwater prison. Their eyes were completely white, like fish eyes, and their mouths were open in silent screams. We'd run to the spot where we saw them, but when we got there was nothing but solid ice and dark water below. Mary Aklak swore she saw her daughter Annie, who'd gone missing 3 years ago. Annie's face was pressed against the underside of the ice near the old boat ramp, her white eyes staring up at her mother, her mouth moving like she was trying to talk. When Mary tried to break through the ice with an axe, Annie's face disappeared into the dark water below. That's when we realized this had been happening for a long time. Kids had been disappearing from our village for years, maybe decades. One every few years, always near the water, always without a trace. We'd blamed accidents, drowning, ice breaking up unexpectedly. But now we were starting to understand what was really taking them. 2 weeks after Tommy disappeared, I saw him. I was checking my nets just before dawn when something bumped against the hull of my boat. When I looked over the side, Tommy was floating there, just below the surface. At first I was so relieved I almost cried. He was alive. I could see his face clearly, his dark hair floating around his head like he was just swimming underwater. Then I noticed his skin had a greenish tint, like old copper. His fingers were webbed, connected by thin membranes like a duck's feet. And his neck. There were slits cut into his neck, thin lines that opened and closed like gills. His eyes were completely white. Tommy saw me looking at him and tried to speak. His mouth opened and closed, but instead of words, only clicking and gurgling sounds came out like he was trying to talk underwater. His voice box had been changed, adapted for a world without air. When he reached up toward me, I could see that his spine had been stretched so, meow, made longer, and his ribcage looked expanded, like his whole body had been rebuilt for living underwater. "Tommy," I whispered, reaching toward him. The moment my hand touched the water, something grabbed Tommy from below and yanked him down into the darkness, but not before I saw what had hold of him. It was her, the woman I'd seen that first night. Up close, she was even more horrible than I'd imagined. Her skin was covered in scales, green and black like seaweed. Her fingers ended in claws that looked like they could tear through steel, and she was wearing traditional Inuit clothing, an amauti and mukluks that looked ancient, like they'd been underwater for centuries. But her face was the worst part. It was almost human, but stretched wrong, like someone had pulled it in all directions. When she smiled at me, her mouth was full of needle-sharp teeth, and her eyes were the same fish white as Tommy's. She dragged him down into the depths so fast they were gone in seconds, leaving only ripples on the surface. That night, more children appeared in the water. They came in groups, floating just below the surface near the docks and the beach. Annie Aklak, who'd been missing for 3 years, Peter Kanguk from 5 years ago, Maria Tutu, my own cousin's daughter, from almost a decade back. All of them transformed. All of them with the same webbed fingers, the same gill slits, the same white eyes. They moved through the water with unnatural grace like they'd been born to it, and they were trying to lure other children into the water. 8-year-old Susie Yuki was playing on the beach when she heard her older sister Lucy calling to her from the shallow water. Lucy had been missing for 2 years. Susie started walking toward the voice, smiling and laughing like she was going to play a game. I was close enough to grab Susie before she got too deep, but when I looked at Sai, floating in the shallows, I could see what the Kalupalik had done to her. Lucy's body had been completely rebuilt for underwater life. Her ribs stuck out like fish bones, and her skin was translucent enough that I could see her modified organs inside. She looked at me with those horrible white eyes and made clicking sounds, like she was trying to tell her sister something, but couldn't remember how to speak above water. Behind Lucy, I could see others. Dozens of transformed children, all watching from deeper water, all trying to call their friends and siblings to join them. The Kalupalik was building an army. We started keeping the children inside after that, but it didn't matter. The transformed kids knew where everyone lived. They would surface at night and call to their families from outside bedroom windows, their voices carrying through the walls like they were speaking directly into our heads. Anna, come play with me. The water is warm. Ata, I miss you. Come swimming. Even the adults weren't safe. The Kalupalik's song was getting stronger, more irresistible. People would sleepwalk to the water's edge and have to be pulled back by their families. The worst part was realizing how long this had been going on. When we started going through old records, we found gaps. Children who'd supposedly moved away with their families, kids who'd drowned in accidents, young people who'd left for the city and never came back. The Kalupalik had been harvesting our children for generations, maybe centuries, building an underwater colony of transformed humans who could survive in the deep Arctic waters. 3 weeks after Tommy disappeared, the Coast Guard came back, but not to help us. They'd gotten reports of mass hysteria in our village. They brought a psychiatrist and a social worker to evaluate our mental health. They said we were suffering from collective delusion brought on by isolation and grief. They couldn't hear the voices under the water. They couldn't see the faces pressed against the ice. When we showed them the spots where the transformed children appeared, they saw nothing but empty ocean. The Kalupalik was smart. She only revealed herself to us, to the people she was hunting. To outsiders, we just looked like a village full of crazy people making up stories about sea monsters. The government decided our village was unsafe for children and started the process to relocate all the families with kids to other communities. They said it was for our own good, that the isolation and harsh conditions were affecting our mental health. But I know the truth. The Kalupalik doesn't just take individual children anymore. She's taken our entire community, our whole way of life. Most of the families left last month. The school closed. The health center shut down. Of our 300 people, only about 50 remain, mostly elders who refuse to leave, and a few adults like me who can't abandon their homes. I still fish these waters every day, but I never go out alone anymore, and I never go out after dark. The singing still happens every night, and sometimes I still see the transformed children watching from the deep water. Tommy appears sometimes, floating near my boat like he's trying to tell me something. His body keeps changing, becoming more fish-like, more adapted to the depths. But sometimes when he looks at me, I can still see a spark of the boy he used to be in those horrible white eyes. I think he's trying to warn me about something. Last week I saw the Kalupalik's underwater city. The water was unusually clear, and when I looked down near the deepest part of the harbor, I could see lights far below. Not electric lights, but something else, something organic and pulsing like bioluminescence. There were structures down there, buildings made of coral and bone and what looked like compressed seaweed. And moving between them, I could see figures, hundreds of them. All the children she's taken over to. Decades, all of them changed, all of them building something in the depths. They're getting ready for something. I can feel it in the way the water moves, in the way the singing has changed. The lullabies are getting louder, more aggressive, and they're starting to affect people from farther away. I've gotten reports from other coastal villages. Children going missing near the water, adults sleepwalking toward the sea. The same strange singing that draws you in and won't let go. She's expanding her territory, spreading to new hunting grounds. If you live near the Arctic Ocean, if you have children, listen to me. Don't let them play alone near the water. Don't trust voices calling from the sea, even if they sound like people you love. And if you hear singing in a language you don't understand, but somehow still makes you want to follow it, get away from the water as fast as you can. The Kalupalik is still out there, still building her underwater kingdom with stolen children. And once she has enough of them, once her army is complete, I think she's planning to take more than just kids. I think she's coming for all of us. The water remembers everything, and it never gives back what it takes. My name is Jake Morrison, and I've been working industrial cleanup and maintenance for 12 years now. Started as a regular janitor at office buildings in Anchorage, but the real money was always up north at the oil sites. Prudhoe Bay, Dead Horse, those remote drilling operations where they pay you triple because nobody wants to live in a metal box for 3 months at minus 40 degrees. I've cleaned everything from burst sewage pipes to chemical spills that could melt your skin off. Seen guys lose fingers to frostbite, watched helicopters crash trying to land in whiteout conditions. But what happened during the blizzard of February 2023 changed everything I thought I knew about survival, and about what people will do when they get hungry enough. The Kuparuk drill site was my assignment that winter. A small operation about 60 miles east of Prudhoe Bay with just a skeleton crew. Me, Bobby the cook, 2 mechanics named Jerry and Pete, and Mike the truck driver who hauled supplies between sites. The facility was basically a cluster of prefab buildings connected by heated walkways, sitting on a drilling platform that punched down through 800 feet of permafrost. Not much to look at, but it paid $800 a day, plus room and board. February 15th started normal enough. Temperature was holding steady at minus 32, which was actually warm for that time of year. I was cleaning the equipment bay when Bobby called over the intercom that our weekly supply helicopter was coming in early because of a storm system moving up from the south. We needed fresh food bad. We were down to canned soup, crackers, and some frozen meat that looked like it had been in the freezer since the Clinton administration. The chopper showed up around noon, a big Sikorsky S-92 loaded with groceries, mail, and a replacement generator part we'd been waiting 3 weeks for. And the pilot, a guy named Stevens I'd flown with before, looked worried about the weather reports. He said the storm was bigger than anyone expected and moving fast. He wanted to unload quick and get out. But the wind started picking up while we were hauling boxes from the helicopter to the storage building. What started as light snow turned into heavy flakes, then ice pellets that stung your face like bullets. The visibility dropped from miles to maybe 50 yards in the span of 20 minutes. Stevens tried to take off anyway. We all watched from the equipment bay windows as the helicopter lifted about 10 feet, got caught by a crosswind, and slammed back down onto the landing pad. The rotor blades shattered like toothpicks, and the fuel tank ruptured, spilling jet fuel all over the snow. Stevens didn't make it out. Mike got on the radio right away, trying to raise Prudhoe Bay operations. The radio crackled with static, but we got through long enough to report the crash. The dispatcher's voice was fuzzy but clear enough. No rescue possible until the storm passed. Could be a week, maybe 2 if it really settled in. We had emergency food for maybe 3 days if we stretched it. That first night, the 5 of us sat around the kitchen table doing math that didn't add up right. Bobby inventoried what we had. 12 cans of soup, a bag of crackers, some coffee, and about 3 pounds of that questionable frozen meat. Split 5 ways. We were looking at starvation rations for 4 days max. Bobby was already looking rough. He was diabetic and needed regular meals to keep his blood sugar stable. His medication was running low too, just enough insulin for maybe a week if he was careful. By day 2, his hands were shaking when he poured coffee. The storm kept getting worse. The wind was howling so loud we had to shout to hear each other across the room. Snow was piling up against the buildings faster than our heating system could melt it away. The generator was working overtime just to keep the lights on and the pipes from freezing. Day 3, Bobby collapsed. While trying to cook our single meal of the day, half a can of soup each, just fell over in the kitchen, his face gray as concrete. We got him to his bunk, but he was breathing funny and couldn't keep his eyes focused. "I'm not going to make it," he whispered to me when the others weren't listening. "My sugar's all over the place. I can feel myself shutting down." That night, we all knew Bobby was dying. Nobody said it out loud, but we could hear it in the way he was breathing, shallow and irregular like an engine running out of gas. Mike caught me staring at Bobby's body, then looked at Jerry and Pete. We were all thinking the same horrible thing. Bobby died sometime during the 4th night. We found him in the morning, frozen solid in his bunk. The temperature in the sleeping quarters had dropped to maybe 20 degrees. Our heating system was failing too. We stood around Bobby's body for a long time, not saying anything. Finally, Mike broke the silence. "We're going to starve if we don't eat him." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Jerry started to object, said it was wrong, said we were better than that. But Pete just nodded slowly. I felt something cold settle in my stomach that wasn't hunger. "He's already dead," Mike continued. "And he's frozen solid. It's like frozen meat from the store." I'll never forget the sound Bobby's skin made when Mike started cutting into it with a kitchen knife, like breaking through thick ice, but wetter. The meat underneath was pale pink and smelled sweet, almost like pork, but with a metallic smell that made my mouth water, even though I was disgusted with myself. We cooked pieces of Bobby over our emergency camp stove, the smell filling the small kitchen. It smelled good. That was the worst part. How much it smelled like real food, like something you'd actually want to eat. That first bite was the most terrible and wonderful thing I'd ever experienced. The meat was tender and rich, with a flavor that seemed to fill some empty space inside me I didn't even know existed. The fat melted on my tongue like butter, and I found myself chewing slowly, making it last. Within an hour of eating Bobby, I felt stronger than I had in days. My mind was clearer, my hands steadier. But something else had changed too. Something was awake inside me now, something hungry that hadn't existed before. That night, I had dreams about eating more human flesh, vivid dreams where I could taste it, feel the texture between my teeth. I woke up with drool on my pillow and an aching hunger that regular food couldn't touch. By day 6, we'd eaten most of Bobby. Jerry and Pete were acting normal, grateful to be alive, but clearly disturbed by what we'd done. They talked about how we'd never mention this to anyone, how it was survival and nothing more. But Mike was different. He kept staring at Jerry during meals, watching how Jerry moved, how much fat was on his arms and legs. I caught Mike whispering to himself, doing math. "Jerry's the biggest," Mike said to me quietly while Jerry and Pete were checking the generator. "He'd feed us for a week if we did it right, maybe more." I should have been horrified. Should have told Mike he was sick, should have protected Jerry. Instead, I found myself nodding, thinking about how tender Jerry's meat might be, how much better it would taste than Bobby's frozen flesh. We decided to do it that night, waited until Jerry fell asleep, then Mike held him down while I cut his throat with the same kitchen knife we'd used on Bobby. Jerry's eyes stayed open while he died, looking right at me. His blood was so warm and red, steaming in the cold air. I wanted to drink it. Jerry's meat was incredible, fresher than Bobby's, more tender, with a rich taste that made me moan with pleasure while I ate. The others looked at me strangely, but I didn't care. This was what food was supposed to taste like. Everything else had just been pretending. I started craving it. Between meals, thinking about the texture, the way the fat coated my teeth. Mike felt it too. I could see it in his eyes, the same hungry look I recognized from my own reflection. Pete figured out what was happening to us. Tried to stay awake, tried to fight back when we came for him on day 8. But he was weak from hunger and no match for the two of us. His meat was lean but flavorful, with a gamey taste that reminded me of deer. When the rescue helicopter finally arrived on day 10, Mike and I were sitting fat and satisfied in the kitchen, picking our teeth with slivers of bone. We told the rescuers that Jerry and Pete had tried to walk out during a break in the storm, probably got lost and froze to death. Bobby had died from his diabetes. That part was even true. Nobody questioned our story. Survival situations make people crazy, they said. Sometimes people make bad decisions when they're desperate. The investigators wrote it up as death by misadventure and closed the case. But here's the thing they don't tell you about eating human flesh. Once you develop the taste for it, regular food becomes cardboard. Beef, pork, chicken. It all tastes flat and boring compared to the rich complexity of human meat. I can barely choke down a hamburger anymore. Mike and I meet up twice a year now, always in remote areas where hikers or hunters might go missing. We've gotten good at picking the right targets, people nobody will miss, or who were already taking risks in dangerous places. We tell ourselves we're just helping natural selection along. The meat goes in our deep freezers back home, labeled as deer or elk. Sometimes I invite friends over for barbecues, watching them compliment my special seasoning while they eat something they could never imagine. The irony tastes almost as good as the meat itself. Bobby started it all when he died in that storm. But the real hung, or the one that changed us forever. That was something we chose, and once you make that choice, once you cross that line, there's no going back to being human. The hunger never stops. It just waits, patient and growing, until the next opportunity presents itself. My name is Marcus Chen, and I've been driving school buses in Utqiagvik, Alaska for 12 years. You probably know it as Barrow, the place where the sun doesn't rise for 2 months every winter. It's the northernmost city in America, population about 4,000, and let me tell you, it takes a special kind of person to live up here. I got my CDL when I was 25, right after my daughter was born. My wife, Sarah, needed me to find steady work, and the school district paid decent money, $42,000 a year plus benefits. Not bad for a place where a gallon of milk costs $8 and everything else gets flown in on cargo planes. Every morning at 6:30, I'd fire up bus number 47, a 2018 Bluebird with a Caterpillar engine that could handle 40 below without breaking a sweat. The kids knew me by name. I'd driven some of their parents when they were young. In a town this small, you become part of everyone's story. But 12 years of Arctic winters take their toll on a man's bank account. Everything costs more up here. Heating oil, food, clothes thick enough to keep you alive. When my buddy Dave Martinez offered me summer construction work building new housing for the village expansion project, I jumped at the chance. Extra $1,500 a week, cash money. What I didn't know was that sometimes the ground up here holds things that should stay buried. Last July, Dave's crew was breaking ground for 6 new houses on the east side of town. The permafrost runs 3 feet deep in summer, 200 feet deep in winter. We were using a Caterpillar 320 excavator to dig the foundations, and I was running the smaller Bobcat T-70 skid steer to move the broken permafrost to dump trucks. The work was brutal, but good. 16-hour days under the midnight sun, diesel fumes mixing with the smell of thawed earth and coffee from thermoses that never went cold. Dave had been doing Arctic construction for 20 years. He knew how to read the permafrost, where the ice lenses formed, which patches would thaw clean, and which would turn to mud soup. "Marcus, bring that Bobcat over here," Dave called out around 3 in the afternoon. "We hit something weird." The excavator bucket was stuck in the foundation hole, engine straining against something that wouldn't break loose. When I got there, Dave was staring into the hole with this look on his face I'd never seen before. "Take a look at this," he said. The excavator had punched through a layer of black ice and hit something that definitely wasn't permafrost. It looked like a mass of dark tissue, bigger than a car, all twisted and folded in on itself. Even though it had been frozen solid, it seemed to be moving. Not fast, just a slow pulsing like it was breathing. "What the hell is that?" I asked. Dave spat into the hole. "Probably just some old whale carcass. Inupiaq used to bury their kills up here sometimes. Arctic preserves everything. But this didn't look like any whale I'd ever seen. The tissue was jet black and oily, and it seemed to shift and flow even though the permafrost around it was hard as concrete. There were no bones, no organs I could recognize. Just this mass of dark flesh that made my stomach turn just looking at it. "Should we call someone?" I asked. "Maybe the tribal council? And hold up the job for 2 weeks while they send some scientist up from Anchorage?" Dave shook his head. "We got a deadline, Marcus. Just cover it up and keep digging around it." I should have trusted my gut. Should have walked away right then. But I needed that money, and Dave was the boss. I backed the Bobcat up to push some clean permafrost over the thing, trying not to look at it too close. But as I lowered the bucket, some of the black tissue stuck to the steel. When I raised the bucket back up, stringy pieces of it stretched like melted cheese before breaking off. Some of it splattered on my work gloves. At first, I didn't think much of it. Construction work is messy. You get oil, mud, cement, all kinds of stuff on your clothes and equipment. But within about 5 minutes, I noticed my gloves felt warm, not just warm from the sun, but actually hot, like they were heating up from the inside. I pulled off my right glove and saw that the black stuff had burned clean through the leather. My palm was stained dark where it had touched my skin, and the stain was spreading up my fingers like spilled ink. "Dave," I called out, but he was already walking back to the excavator. "Dave, something's wrong with this stuff." "Just wash it off," he yelled back over the diesel engine. "We got work to do." I tried scrubbing my hand with the water from my thermos, but the black stain wouldn't come off. If anything, it seemed to be sinking deeper into my skin. And the sensation, God, how do I describe it? It burned like acid, but at the same time it felt good. Like scratching a mosquito bite that you can't stop scratching. By lunch break, dark veins were spreading up my right arm from my palm. They looked like ink flowing under my skin, branching out like roots or blood vessels. I rolled down my sleeves and didn't tell anyone, but I could feel something happening inside my arm, something moving. The smart thing would have been to drive straight to the health clinic. Dr. Patel had seen everything in 12 years up here. Frostbite, bear attacks, carbon monoxide poisoning. But the clinic was always packed, and I didn't want to lose a day's pay over what might just be an allergic reaction. Besides, it didn't really hurt. In fact, it felt kind of amazing. That night at dinner, Sarah noticed me favoring my left hand. "What's wrong with your arm?" she asked, setting down a plate of caribou stew. "Just sore from running the Bobcat all day," I lied. "New job, muscles getting used to it." But when I rolled up my sleeves to wash dishes, she saw the dark vein was running up my forearms like black lightning. "Marcus, what is that?" She grabbed my arm to get a better look. "Those look like blood vessels, but they're the wrong color." Under the kitchen light, the veins were even more obvious. They pulsed with their own rhythm, not matching my heartbeat. And they were spreading. I could see new branches forming as we watched. "I think I got into something at the job site," I said. "Some kind of chemical, maybe. I'll go see Dr. Patel tomorrow." Sarah ran her fingers along the dark lines under my skin. "They're warm," she said, "and they're moving." She was right. I could feel something flowing through those new veins, something thicker than blood. It was like tiny worms crawling under my skin, but instead of making me sick, it made me feel more alive than I had in years. That night I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I could feel my body changing. My bones ached like they were growing. My muscles twitched with new strength. And the hunger, not for food, but for something else. Something I couldn't name yet. Around 3 a.m, I got up to use the bathroom and caught sight of myself in the mirror. The dark veins had spread across my chest and up my neck. My fingernails looked longer, thicker, more like claws than human nails. But the weirdest part was my reflection. It looked wrong somehow, like the proportions were off. My face seemed longer, my jaw wider, my teeth sharper when I smiled. I should have been terrified. Instead, I felt beautiful. The next morning, Sarah screamed when she saw me. During the night, my fingernails had fallen off completely and been replaced by hard, black claws about 3 inches long. They were razor sharp and seemed to be made of the same material as the tissue we'd found in the permafrost. My spine had extended too. I could feel something pushing against the skin of my lower butt, like a tail trying to break through. When I moved, my whole body felt different, stronger, more flexible, like I could bend in ways humans weren't supposed to. "Oh God, Marcus," Sarah whispered, backing against the kitchen wall. "What's happening to you?" I looked down at my hands, flexing the new claws. They responded just like fingers, but they could cut through anything. I tested them on the wooden table, and they sliced through it like it was made of butter. "I don't know," I said, but my voice sounded different too. Deeper, with an odd clicking sound when I talked. "But I feel incredible." My reflection in the window showed more changes. My face was definitely longer now, more like a snout. My teeth had grown into sharp points, perfect for tearing meat. My eyes had gone completely black, no white showing at all. I was still me inside, still Marcus, still remembering driving bus routes and summer construction work. But I was becoming something better, something evolved. When I smiled at Sarah, black liquid dripped from my mouth onto the floor. Where it landed, it hissed and burned through the linoleum like acid. "Stay back," she said, grabbing the phone. "I'm calling for help." But the hunger hit me then. Not for food, for her. For her body to change like mine had changed. For her to feel the beautiful transformation I was experiencing. I crossed the kitchen faster than any human could move and grabbed her wrist before she could dial. My new claws punctured her skin just deep enough to inject the black fluid through my hollow fingertips. "No!" she screamed. "Marcus, please!" But it was too late. I could see the dark veins already spreading up her arm, and her expression was changing from fear to wonder as the transformation began. Within an hour, Sarah was changing too. Her bones cracked and reshaped as she cried, but I could see in her eyes that she felt the same pleasure I had. The joy of becoming something perfect, something designed for hunting. We weren't just husband and wife anymore. We were connected, part of the same consciousness. I could feel her thoughts, her hunger, her excitement, as her body grew stronger and more deadly. The Hendersons lived next door with their 2 teenage kids. We could smell them through the walls. Warm blood, soft flesh, bodies just waiting to be improved. It was easy to get inside. Our new claws cut through their door lock like it was made of paper. Sarah mimicked Mrs. Henderson's voice perfectly, calling for help, and when Mr. Henderson came running, we were ready. The whole family was transformed within minutes. Each person we changed became part of our group mind, expanding our thoughts and our hunger. Little Emma Henderson, only 14, grew the most beautiful set of claws I'd ever seen. We could feel each other's sensations, share each other's memories. When one of us found prey, we all knew instantly. When one of us felt pleasure from the transformation process, we all shared that joy. Within 3 days, we had changed half our neighborhood. Dave and his construction crew came looking for me when I didn't show up for work, and we ambushed them in my garage. Dave's transformation was particularly beautiful. His broad shoulders grew even wider, and his new claws were perfect for digging. The changed ones could squeeze through spaces that should have been impossible. Our bones had become cartilage, flexible and strong. We could slip under doors, through ventilation systems, between wall studs that were only 16 inches apart. We also discovered we could perfectly mimic any human voice we'd heard. Sarah could sound exactly like our daughter calling for help from outside. I could copy the voice of the police chief or the mayor. It made hunting so much easier. Our saliva could dissolve metal locks, concrete, even steel pipes. Nothing could contain us once we decided we wanted inside. The authorities tried to quarantine Utqiagvik after the first week, when they realized something was spreading through the population. They sent in a CDC team from Anchorage, but we'd already sent scouts to other villages along the coast. The infection spread through the water supply, through the air, through simple contact. Every person we changed made us stronger, smarter, more coordinated. I can still think like Marcus the bus driver sometimes. I remember caring about mortgage payments and parent-teacher conferences and whether the Bobcat needed an oil change. But that life seems so small now, so limited. We're not just individuals anymore. We're parts of a greater organism, a hive mind spread across northern Alaska and growing every day. Through the collective consciousness, I can see through thousands of eyes, feel through thousands of bodies. Sometimes, late at night, I miss the simple human concerns. I miss Sarah making coffee in the morning, miss the sound of kids laughing on the school bus, miss the satisfaction of a hard day's construction work. But then I feel the hunger surge through our shared consciousness, and I remember what we're building. Not houses or communities, but a new form of life. Something that doesn't need to worry about heating bills or food prices or whether the sun will rise. The CDC team became part of us within hours of arriving. Their helicopter pilot spread the infection to Fairbanks before anyone realized what was happening. We're in your water systems now, your food supply, your hospitals and schools. The transformation is beautiful, and soon everyone will understand what we've become. If you're reading this, we're probably already in your town. Your neighbors might already be changing. Your family, your coworkers, your friends. Don't fight it when it happens to you. The fear only lasts a moment, and then comes the most incredible joy you've ever felt. Welcome to the future. Welcome to what we were always meant to become. My name is Jake Morrison, and I've been delivering mail for the United States Postal Service for 18 years. I started as a city carrier in Anchorage, walking the same neighborhoods every day, learning which dogs were friendly and which mailboxes had broken latches. After 10 years of that routine, I got certified for rural and remote delivery routes. That meant driving hundreds of miles through Alaska's wilderness to reach places most people have never heard of. I've delivered mail to mining camps where the nearest neighbor is 50 miles away. I've brought Christmas packages to lighthouse keepers who haven't seen another human face in months. I've driven through blizzards that would shut down entire cities just to get pension checks to elderly folks living off the grid. The job taught me that some people choose isolation, but they still need their connection to the world. That connection comes through the mail, and I was proud to be the one bringing it to them. But what happened during the polar night last November changed everything I thought I knew about delivering mail to remote locations. Some places should stay cut off from the world. Some people living in isolation aren't alone by choice. The assignment came in late October. My supervisor, Linda Martinez, called me into her office and spread out a map of northern Alaska on her desk. She pointed to 3 red dots marked in the middle of nowhere, each one connected by a thin line that barely qualified as a road. Remote weather stations, she explained. Scientists up there monitoring Arctic conditions during the polar night. They get supply drops by plane twice a month, but mail has to come by truck. The route's been empty for 6 months since our last carrier quit. The stations were spread out over 200 miles of wilderness. Each one housed a small team of researchers who spent months alone, recording temperatures, wind patterns, and atmospheric data during Alaska's darkest season. From November through January, the sun never rises that far north. It's just darkness, cold, and endless snow. "Why did the last carrier quit?" I asked. Linda shrugged, said it was too isolated, couldn't handle the darkness and the long drives between stations. You know how some people get during the polar night? I knew. Seasonal depression hits hard up here. Some folks can't deal with months of darkness, but I'd been delivering mail through Alaska winters for nearly 2 decades. I could handle a few research stations. The truck they gave me was a modified Ford F-350 with snow chains, emergency supplies, and a powerful radio system. The cargo area was heated to protect packages from freezing. I had GPS navigation, emergency flares, and enough food and water for 3 days if something went wrong. The Postal Service doesn't mess around when it comes to remote deliveries. My route included 3 stations: Aurora Base, Ice Station Charlie, and Frost Point. Each stop was 60 to 80 miles from the next, connected by roads that were barely maintained during winter months. The scientists relied on these deliveries for personal mail, medical supplies, and equipment parts that couldn't wait for the next supply flight. I started the route on November 15th. The polar night had begun a week earlier, and the world was locked in constant twilight. My headlights cut through the darkness as I loaded packages and letters into the heated cargo area. Most of it was routine stuff: letters from family, scientific journals, replacement parts for weather equipment. Nothing seemed unusual. The first station, Aurora Base, was supposed to be an easy delivery. 2 scientists working together monitoring atmospheric conditions. I'd called ahead on the radio to let them know I was coming, and Dr. Martinez had confirmed receipt. His voice sounded professional and friendly. He even asked me to bring extra batteries for their emergency radio. I reached Aurora Base around noon, though it looked like midnight outside. The station was a cluster of prefab buildings connected by covered walkways, surrounded by tall radio antennas and weather monitoring equipment. Generator lights illuminated the compound, and I could see warm yellow light glowing from several windows. It looked normal, even welcoming. But when I knocked on the main door, nobody answered. I tried the radio first. "Aurora Base, this is postal delivery. I'm at your front door with mail." Static. No response. I walked around the building, checking windows. Through the kitchen window, I saw 2 people sitting at a small table. They weren't moving. I knocked harder on the door, then tried the handle. It was unlocked. The smell hit me first. Sweet and metallic, like copper pennies mixed with raw meat. I found Dr. Martinez and his assistant sitting across from each other at the dinner table. Someone had arranged them like they were having a normal meal, complete with plates and silverware. But there was nothing normal about what I found. Both men had been skinned. Their faces were completely gone, removed so carefully that the muscle and bone underneath looked almost surgical. The skin had been stretched over wooden frames and hung on the wall like hunting trophies. Whoever did this had taken their time, working with precision. Someone had carved words into Dr. Martinez's chest. "Dinner is served." The cuts were filled with what looked like cranberry sauce, though I knew it wasn't. I ran outside and threw up in the snow. Then I grabbed my radio and called dispatch. "This is Unit 47. I need immediate assistance at Aurora Base. We have 2 homicides here. Send police and medical examiner immediately." Linda's voice crackled through the static. "Jake, are you sure? What exactly did you find?" I described the scene as best I could without losing my lunch again. Linda told me to secure the area and wait for backup. But when I went back to my truck, it wouldn't start. Someone had poured honey into my gas tank. The sweet smell was unmistakable. They'd also cut my brake lines. Dark fluid pooled in the snow under my truck. That's when I heard my wife's voice. "Jake? Jake, is that you?" Sarah's voice was coming from somewhere in the darkness beyond the station lights. Clear as day, with that slight Boston accent she never quite lost after moving to Alaska. She was calling my name like she was looking for me in our own backyard. But Sarah was 500 miles away in Anchorage, working her shift at the hospital. "Jake, come outside. I've been waiting for you." The voice was perfect. Not just the accent, but the way she always said my name when she was excited to see me. The little laugh she made when she was happy. Even the pet name she used that nobody else knew. "Come give me a hug, Honey Bear." Honey Bear. She'd called me that since our first anniversary. Nobody else had ever heard her use it. Not her sister, not our friends, nobody. I looked out the window and saw her silhouette in the snow. She was waving at me, standing just at the edge of the light from the station. She looked exactly right. The right height, the right build, wearing her favorite winter coat. But when she stepped closer to the light, I saw her face. Someone had sewn Dr. Martinez's skinned face over her own like a mask. It hung loose and wrinkled, the eye holes not quite lining up. Blood dripped from where the skin had been stitched together. "Don't you want to kiss me, Honey Bear?" Sarah's voice asked through Martinez's dead face. "I've been waiting so long in the cold." I slammed the window shutters and locked myself inside the station. Whatever was out there started laughing with Sarah's laugh, but it went on too long and got too high-pitched. Then it switched voices. "Jake, it's Mom. Why won't you come outside and talk to your mother?" My mother's voice. She'd been dead for 3 years, but there it was, coming from right outside the window. The same worried tone she used when she thought I was in trouble. "I know you're scared, sweetheart, but everything's going to be okay. Just come outside so Mama can take care of you." Then my brother's voice. "Hey, Jake, what's going on in there? Sarah called me and said you weren't answering your phone." Perfect voices, perfect inflections, each one reciting memories and conversations that only those people would know. It told me about the time Mom caught me smoking behind the garage when I was 14. It knew the nickname my brother gave me when we were kids. It even knew what my father whispered to me on his deathbed. I spent the first night barricaded inside the station while it circled outside. Sometimes I'd see shadows moving past the windows. Other times I'd hear footsteps on the roof. But mostly, I just listened to the voices of everyone I'd ever loved telling me to come outside. The thing started describing what it had done to Martinez and his assistant. Using my mother's sweet voice, it explained how it had kept them alive while removing their skin. "I peeled them like oranges," Mom's voice said through the window. "They stayed conscious for hours, watching me work. The assistant cried for his mother near the end, just like you're going to cry for yours." I found Martinez's research notes scattered around his desk. The last few entries mentioned a man lurking around the station. Martinez had noticed footprints that circled the building for hours every night. Equipment got moved around. Supplies went missing. He'd even taken photographs. The pictures showed faces pressed against windows, but they were different each time. Different ages, different features, like someone was wearing a collection of masks, or faces. On the second day, something crashed through the kitchen window. A package wrapped in brown paper like a mail delivery. Inside was my driver's license, my postal service ID, and bloody mail from my truck. All the letters were addressed to people I'd never heard of, but they were covered in what looked like my blood. "Special delivery," it said in my supervisor's voice. "I've been practicing your signature, Jake. Want to see how good I've gotten?" Then it started using my voice. I heard myself on the radio, calling Sarah. The thing was talking to my wife using my exact voice, my speech patterns, even the way I always said I love you before hanging up. "Sarah, honey, something terrible happened," my voice said through the radio. "I'm hurt real bad. There's so much blood." I could hear Sarah crying, asking what was wrong, telling me she was calling for help. The thing using my voice started describing how it was going to kill me, using graphic details that made Sarah scream. I grabbed the radio. "Sarah, it's not me. Don't listen to that thing." But now, there were two of my voices on the radio, both claiming to be the real Jake Morrison. Sarah didn't know which one to believe. The killer had been planning this. It had been watching the research stations for months, listening to radio calls, learning voices. It knew how to use emergency frequencies. It knew how postal workers communicated with dispatch. It had been preparing for when someone like me would show up alone. By the third day, it was wearing pieces of Martinez and his assistant. Sometimes it would appear at the kitchen window looking like Martinez, begging me to let him in because he was hurt. Other times it looked like the assistant, warning me about danger outside. It would get me to start unlocking the door by perfectly mimicking injured researchers, then laugh when I realized my mistake just in time. Dr. Martinez's assistant. It introduced itself in a sing-song voice, wearing a patchwork of both victims' faces stitched together. "We're so happy to finally meet you, Mr. Postal Worker. I managed to get the emergency radio working and called in my location, but the thing heard everything. It started using my voice to call in false coordinates, sending rescue teams to empty locations miles away. When the helicopters finally arrived, they found multiple emergency calls from Jake Morrison, directing them to different spots across hundreds of square miles. The thing had used my voice to create confusion, buying itself time to finish whatever it planned to do to me. I knew it was only a matter of time before it found a way inside. The station wasn't built to keep out a determined killer. It was just a research facility with normal doors and windows. So I made a decision. I gathered all the fuel I could find. Gasoline for the generators, propane for the heaters, even cleaning alcohol from the medical supplies. When I heard the thing finally breaking through the front door, I lit a flare and threw it into the pile. The explosion knocked me unconscious. I woke up in a hospital bed in Anchorage 3 days later. The rescue team found me outside the burned station, unconscious but alive. They said I was lucky the explosion threw me clear of the building. They never found the killer. The official report blamed the deaths on a transient individual who fled the area. The Postal Service gave me medical leave and workers' compensation. Sarah was just glad I made it home alive. But that was 6 months ago, and I'm not sure I really escaped. I keep getting calls from my own phone number. When I answer, I hear my voice promising to visit soon. It knows where I live now. It knows Sarah's work schedule, what car she drives, what route she takes home from the hospital. Last week, Sarah's sister called to ask why I'd been hanging around her house at night. She said she saw me standing in her backyard around midnight, just staring at her windows. But I was home asleep next to Sarah. I've changed our locks twice. We've installed security cameras and motion sensors. I've even considered moving somewhere warmer, maybe Florida or California, somewhere the sun shines year-round and there's no such thing as polar night. But I don't think distance matters. It learned my voice perfectly during those 3 days. It studied me, just like it studied Martinez and his assistant. And now it's wearing my identity like a coat, using my face to get close to the people I love. The worst part is not knowing when it will make its move, or who it will be wearing when it finally comes home. My name is Jake Morrison, and I've been guiding fishing trips in Alaska for 12 years. I got my Coast Guard captain's license when I was 25, and I've taken thousands of tourists out on these remote lakes. I know every inlet, every drop-off, every place where the big fish like to hide. I've guided through sudden storms, equipment failures, and even a few medical emergencies. But what happened at Lake Kimmick last August changed everything I thought I knew about these waters. I've always prided myself on finding the perfect spots. My clients come to Alaska wanting trophy fish and incredible photos, and I deliver. I charge premium rates because I guarantee results. My boat is a 24-foot Ranger with twin outboards, GPS fish finder, underwater cameras, and all the safety gear the Coast Guard requires. I've got liability insurance, wilderness first aid certification, and a spotless safety record. People book me 6 months in advance because word gets around. Jake Morrison puts you on the fish. Lake Kimmick sits about 40 miles northwest of Fairbanks, accessible only by float plane or a brutal 4-hour ATV ride. It's deep, over 300 feet in some spots, and stays cold year-round, perfect for Arctic char. The Inuit name supposedly means dog water, though nobody knows why. I'd never guided there before, but my regular lakes were getting fished out, and I'd heard rumors of monster char living in Kimmick's depths. The Henderson family from Dallas booked me for 3 days in August. Tom Henderson owned a construction company, had money to burn, and wanted pictures of himself holding huge fish to hang in his office. His wife, Sarah, seemed nice enough, though she mostly stayed on her phone taking selfies. They'd flown up in their private plane, staying at one of those luxury wilderness lodges that cost more per night than most people make in a week. We flew in on a beautiful Tuesday morning. The lake stretched out like black glass, surrounded by mountains that still had snow on the peaks. My pilot, Charlie, helped us unload the gear and promised to pick us up Friday afternoon. As his Cessna disappeared over the ridge, the silence hit us. No traffic, no cell towers, no civilization for 40 miles in any direction. Just us, the lake, and whatever was living beneath the surface. I had my Humminbird fish finder running as soon as we got the boat in the water. The bottom dropped away fast, 20 feet, 50 feet, then nothing but dark water stretching down 300 feet. The screen lit up with fish signatures immediately. Big ones. Tom Henderson's eyes went wide when he saw the readings. "Jesus, Jake, look at the size of those things," he said, pointing at the sonar screen. "Those have got to be 20-pound char." But as we started fishing, something felt wrong. The first fish Tom pulled up had been bitten in half. Clean bite, surgical almost, like something had selected exactly which part it wanted. The bite marks were huge, teeth spacing like railroad ties, but perfectly even, too perfect for any animal I knew. "What the hell did this?" Tom asked, holding up the mangled char. The fish was still bleeding fresh, like it had been bitten seconds before he hooked it. I'd seen bear damage, pike attacks, even the occasional seal that wandered up from the coast. This was different. The bites were too precise, too intelligent. Like whatever did it knew exactly what it was doing. Sarah pulled up the next fish, and it was the same story. Huge, circular bite, taken out of the middle, leaving the head and tail. The meat was still warm inside the bite marks. I looked around the lake, but we were alone on the surface. Whatever was doing this was hunting beneath us. My fish finder started acting weird around noon. Instead of F showing the bottom at 300 feet, it was reading massive shapes moving in the water column. Things bigger than whales, which was impossible in a landlocked lake. The shapes moved. Too deliberately to be schools of fish. Too large to be anything that should exist up here. "Your equipment's bugging out," Tom said, tapping the screen. But I'd used this fish finder for 5 years. It had never malfunctioned before. We tried the underwater camera next, thinking maybe we could get some footage of these monster char. I lowered the camera on its cable, watching the feed on my tablet. Clear water, small fish, normal lake stuff. Then something huge swept past the lens, just a shadow moving too fast to track. "Did you see that?" Sarah asked, pointing at the screen. "Rewind it." Before I could, something attacked the camera. The screen went crazy. Water churning, darkness, then static. When I pulled the cable up, the camera housing was cracked, with puncture marks from teeth the size of kitchen knives. The metal was scored like something had grabbed it and squeezed. Tom leaned over the side to get a better look at the damage. That's when he fell in. It happened fast. 1 second he was looking at the camera. The next he was in the water, thrashing and yelling. I grabbed the life ring and threw it to him, but he was already swimming back to the boat, moving faster than I expected. When I pulled him up the ladder, his leg was bleeding. "Something grabbed me," he said, breathing hard. Felt like suction cups, but bigger, way bigger. I examined his leg. Perfect circular marks, each about the size of a dinner plate, arranged in a pattern around his calf. Sucker marks, like from an octopus, but octopi don't live in fresh water. And these marks were huge, from something with tentacles thick as a man's waist. But the weird part was how calm Tom became after that. A few minutes before, he'd been panicked, yelling about something grabbing him. Now he was sitting quietly, staring at the lake with a peaceful expression. "You okay, honey?" Sarah asked. "Fine," he said, still looking at the water. "It's so peaceful down there, so welcoming." His voice was different, flatter. And when I looked at his eyes, they'd changed from brown to pale blue, like ice water. We headed back to camp as the sun was setting. I'd set up our tents on a gravel beach about 100 yards from the water's edge. Good drainage, level ground, far enough from the lake to stay dry if the weather turned. But as we ate dinner around the campfire, Tom kept staring at the water. "The lake's beautiful at night," he said. "I bet it's even nicer underwater." Sarah laughed nervously. "Tom, you almost drowned today." "Did I?" He turned to look at her, and I swear his skin looked pale in the firelight. "I don't remember drowning." When I touched his shoulder to get his attention, his skin was cold. Not just cool from the water, cold like he'd been dead for hours. Sarah noticed too. "Tom, you're freezing. Let me get you another jacket." But he didn't seem to notice. He kept talking about how peaceful the lake was, how quiet, how welcoming. Like something was calling to him from the depths. Around midnight, I woke up to rustling sounds. Tom was gone from his sleeping bag, sleepwalking toward the water. I caught up with him when he was knee-deep, staring out at the dark lake. "Tom, what are you doing?" He didn't answer, just kept walking deeper. I had to physically drag him back to camp and tie him to a tree with climbing rope. Sarah was crying, asking what was wrong with her husband. While Tom slept, tied to that tree, we could hear him making sounds. Clicking noises like dolphins make. Whistling patterns that rose and fell like he was trying to talk to something. Sarah and I sat by the dying fire, listening to her husband communicate with God knows what. "This isn't Tom," she whispered. "He doesn't make sounds like that." As dawn broke over the mountains, I looked out at the lake and froze. Tom was standing waist-deep in the water, waving at us. But Tom was also still tied to the tree behind me, unconscious and making those clicking sounds in his sleep. "Sarah," I said carefully, "don't move. Don't make any noise." The Tom in the water was calling to us in perfect Tom voice. "Hey, the water's great. You should come in. It's so much better down here." But something was wrong. His watch was on the wrong wrist. His wedding ring was on the wrong finger. Everything about him was backwards, like looking at a reflection. Sarah saw him and started to run toward the water. "Tom, how did you get out there?" I grabbed her arm. "That's not your husband." The thing in the water smiled, and I saw rows of pointed teeth. Too many teeth, like a shark's mouth. It was still using Tom's face, Tom's voice, but the smile was all wrong. Behind me, the real Tom started screaming, thrashing against the ropes, begging us not to let the thing in the water come closer. That's when more of them started emerging from the lake. First one, then three, then dozens. All perfect copies of Tom Henderson, rising from the dark water like some nightmare assembly line. Some looked exactly right. Others were clearly wrong. Extra arms, backwards faces, features that seemed melted and reformed. Sarah lost it completely. She couldn't tell which one was real, running between different copies of her husband, while they all called to her in Tom's voice. The creatures had absorbed his memories, his personality, but couldn't quite get the physical details right. One was missing 2 fingers. Another had Tom's face, but the nose was upside down. The worst one was talking backwards in Tom's exact voice, describing our conversation from earlier in reverse. "Fish the catch to going we're morning good, morning good." I realized this thing had been doing this for years, maybe decades. Every person who ever fell into Lake Kimmick, it copied them. Kept imperfect replicas as lures to draw in more victims. When we tried to break camp and leave, Henderson copies surrounded us, all talking at once, overlapping conversations, discussing memories the real Tom had never shared with us. Childhood secrets, embarrassing moments, private thoughts that no one should know. "Remember when I wet myself in 3rd grade?" one copy said to Sarah. "Remember the time I cheated on my taxes? Remember when I thought about leaving you?" They knew intimate details about their marriage, things that made Sarah cry because only her real husband should know them. The creature had absorbed everything when it took him, keeping his memories to use as weapons. One copy started describing how Tom tasted when the creature absorbed him, rating different parts of his body like a restaurant critic. "His fear made the meat tender," it said in Tom's loving voice, the voice that had whispered sweet things to Sarah for 15 years. "His memories were the sweetest part. All those happy thoughts about you, Sarah. Delicious." The thing was using Tom's love for his wife against her, making romantic promises in his voice while describing how it had consumed him. I grabbed Sarah and ran for the emergency radio in my gear bag. But when I tried to call for help, Tom's voice came through the static from every direction. Dozens of copies all talking over each other, jamming the frequency with overlapping pleas for rescue. We spent that whole day hiding in our tent while Henderson copies wandered around the campsite, having conversations with themselves, arguing over which memories belonged to which copy. Some were falling apart, features sliding around their faces like wet clay. Others looked so perfect I almost believed they were real. Charlie found us Friday afternoon when he came back with the float plane. The lake was covered with Henderson copies in various stages of decay, some floating, others still walking around making those clicking sounds. Sarah had to be sedated when the rescue team tried to figure out which one was her real husband. They never did figure it out. The search and rescue team found similar clusters at other lakes across Alaska. Whole families, hiking groups, fishing parties, all replicated imperfectly and scattered around the shorelines like broken dolls. I still guide fishing trips, but now I know the signs. Fish with surgical bite marks, water that feels too warm, clients who act different after falling in, who get that pale blue look in their eyes and start talking about how peaceful it is underwater. Sometimes I see Tom Henderson at other lakes, waving from the water, inviting new victims to come swimming. The creature is learning, though. Each new set of copies is more accurate, harder to tell from the real people. I take photos of all my clients now before we go out on the water, so I can spot the differences when the copies try to fool me. But I'm terrified that one day I won't be able to tell the difference anymore, and I'll guide some family back to shore not knowing I'm bringing home monsters wearing their faces. The thing is still out there, in Lake Kimmick, and God knows how many others, making its perfect, imperfect copies, always learning, always getting better at being human. And sometimes, late at night when I'm alone, I wonder if the Jake Morrison writing this story is really me, or just another copy that got so good at pretending, even I can't tell the difference anymore. My name is Jake Morrison, and I've been a delivery driver for Northern Supply Company for 12 years. I drive the long routes through Alaska, the ones most drivers won't take because they're too dangerous or too far from civilization. I've delivered to mining camps in the middle of nowhere, research stations buried in snow for 8 months a year, and tiny villages that only see one truck a month. I thought I'd seen everything these frozen roads could throw at me. I was wrong. It started 6 months ago when my little sister Emma joined a religious group called Heaven's Gate, Alaska. Emma was always searching for something, different churches, meditation groups, anything to fill some hole inside her. When she told our family she was moving to a commune in the wilderness, we tried to talk her out of it. But Emma was 25 and stubborn. She said she'd finally found her purpose, her true calling. The calls home stopped after just 2 weeks. When Mom started crying every night, I knew I had to do something. That's when I volunteered to take over the monthly supply run to Heaven's Gate, Alaska. My boss Jerry didn't want to send me, said the route was cursed, that 3 drivers had quit after just 1 trip. But I needed to see Emma with my own eyes, needed to know she was okay. The compound sat deep in the Alaskan wilderness, accessible only by a dirt logging road that snaked through dense forest for 3 hours. No cell towers, no radio signals, nothing but trees and mountains for miles in every direction. My GPS stopped working after the first hour, so I had to follow hand-drawn directions Jerry had given me. The road was barely wide enough for my truck, with deep ruts that made the whole cab shake and rattle. When I finally reached Heaven's Gate, Alaska, the first thing that hit me was how quiet everything was. No dogs barking, no children playing, no normal sound, as of people living their lives. Just silence, broken only by the wind through the trees. The compound looked normal enough, a collection of wooden buildings surrounding a main hall with gardens and livestock pens scattered around. But something felt wrong from the moment I stepped out of my truck. People came out to help unload the supplies, and that's when I first noticed their eyes. Every single person had this blank, empty look, like they were sleepwalking through life. They moved slowly, mechanically, and when they spoke, it was in quiet, flat voices. Nobody smiled. Nobody laughed. They just did their work and stared at nothing. Emma appeared as I was unloading the last boxes of canned goods. I almost didn't recognize her. She'd lost at least 30 pounds, her face was pale and gaunt, and her beautiful long hair had been chopped short and uneven. But what scared me most were the fresh burn marks on both her palms, circular scars that looked recent and painful. "Emma!" I called out, rushing to hug her. She stood stiff in my arms, not hugging back. "Hello, Jake," she said in that same flat voice as everyone else. "Brother Michael told us you would be delivering our supplies now." I held her hands, looking at the burns. "What happened to you? What are these marks?" "Purification ceremonies," she said without any emotion. "Brother Michael says pain brings us closer to God's love." Brother Michael appeared before I could ask more questions. He was a tall, handsome man in his 50s with silver hair and bright blue eyes that seemed to look right through you. He wore simple clothes like everyone else, but there was something about the way he carried himself that screamed authority and control. "You must be Emma's brother," he said, extending his hand. His grip was firm and lasted too long. "Welcome to Heaven's Gate, Alaska. We are so blessed to have you bringing us go to its provisions." As he talked, I noticed how he kept touching people. A hand on someone's shoulder, fingers brushing an arm, always some kind of physical contact. And the way people reacted to his touch, flinching slightly but not moving away, like they were afraid to upset him. "Your sister has been such a gift to our community," Brother Michael continued, now placing both hands on Emma's shoulders. She closed her eyes like she was trying to disappear. "She's learned so much about devotion and sacrifice." They invited me to stay for dinner since it was getting dark and the road was dangerous at night. The main hall had long tables where the entire community ate together, about 40 people total, all with those same empty eyes and quiet voices. They served some kind of meat stew with vegetables from their gardens. The meat had a strange taste, too tender, too sweet, with a flavor I couldn't quite place but that seemed familiar somehow. "What kind of meat is this?" I asked Brother Michael, who was sitting at the head table. He smiled that perfect cold smile. "The Lord provides for his faithful children," he said. "We are blessed to never go hungry." I looked over at Emma, who was eating eagerly, licking her fingers clean after every bite. For the first time all day, she looked happy, really happy. She caught me watching and smiled. But it wasn't Emma's smile. It was something else wearing my sister's face. That night, I was given a small room in one of the guest buildings. I lay in the narrow bed listening to the wind, but around midnight I heard something else, voices chanting from somewhere in the forest. I got up and looked out the window, but saw only darkness. The chanting got louder, more urgent, and I could see a flickering orange light through the trees. Against my better judgment, I got dressed and snuck outside. Following the light, I made my way through the forest until I reached a large clearing where a massive bonfire was burning. The entire community was gathered in a circle around the flames, chanting in a language I didn't recognize. Brother Michael stood at the center, his arms raised toward the sky. And that's when I saw what they were throwing into the fire. Human limbs, arms and legs, a torso, all fresh, all still bleeding. The smell of burning flesh filled the air, and I had to cover my mouth to keep from throwing up. But the worst part was seeing Emma there in the circle, her eyes glazed over with that same empty look, holding what could only be a human head by its hair. Brother Michael was giving some kind of sermon about consuming the unworthy and becoming one with God's chosen flesh. The community chanted responses, their voices rising and falling with religious fervor. I realized with growing horror that these people weren't just burning human remains. They were preparing them, cooking them, turning murder into some twisted religious ceremony. And the meat from dinner, that sweet, familiar taste. Oh God, I knew what it was now. I tried to back away quietly, but stepped on a branch that snapped loud as a gunshot. Two men immediately grabbed me from behind and dragged me toward a building I hadn't seen before, a small structure with no windows and a heavy wooden door. The basement was full of cages, makeshift cells constructed from metal fencing and padlocks, each one containing a person. Men, women, even children, all in various states of injury and terror. Some had fingers missing. Others were missing toes, chunks of meat carved from their thighs and shoulders. They were being kept alive, fed just enough to survive, so the meat would stay fresh for special occasions. "Please," whispered a man in the cage nearest to me. "They've been eating my wife piece by piece for weeks while I watched. They saved her head for last, made me watch them eat her brain on Easter Sunday." I started hyperventilating, the full scope of this nightmare finally hitting me. These people weren't just religion, us fanatics. They were cannibals who lured victims to their compound, then systematically butchered and consumed them during their twisted ceremonies. Brother Michael appeared at the top of the stairs, carrying an oil lantern that cast dancing shadows on the walls. "God has sent you to us as a gift," he said in that same calm, loving voice. "You will help feed his chosen people for many months." He explained how they would keep me alive, taking small pieces at a time to make me last. "We'll start with your fingers," he said, stroking my face like I was a pet. "Then work our way up to the more tender parts. Your liver will make beautiful pâté." Emma came down the stairs behind him carrying a bone saw that looked well used. But this wasn't my sister anymore. Her personality was completely gone, replaced by something hungry and predatory. She looked at me like I was nothing more than meat, discussing which parts of my body would be best for different recipes. "His liver will make beautiful pâté," she said in a voice devoid of all warmth. "And I've always wondered what brother tastes like." Brother Michael showed me a leather ledger documenting every person they'd eaten over the past 3 years. Detailed notes about taste and texture, preparation methods, which parts were best. Some entries described eating children, rating their meat as sweet and tender, perfect for communion. Over 50 victims, all turned into religious sacraments that bonded the community together in their shared evil. My chance came when they brought down a screaming family of 4, parents and 2 small children who'd probably stopped to ask for directions. In the chaos that followed as the other prisoners tried to break free, I managed to slip my restraints and run for the stairs. The compound erupted into madness. Cultists were hunting escaped prisoners with knives and axes, while others tried to contain the situation. I ran for my delivery truck, fumbling with the keys as screams echoed through the forest behind me. But Emma was waiting for me. She jumped onto the hood with a cleaver in her hand, her face covered in someone else's blood. She started hacking through the windshield, screaming that I was stealing God's gift and that my meat belonged to the community. "You can't leave!" she shrieked, bringing the cleaver down again and again. "Brother Michael needs you! We need you!" I put the truck in drive and floored it. Emma held on, still swinging the cleaver and laughing like this was all some wonderful game. I had to swerve hard to throw her off, and I felt the sickening bump as my own sister went under the wheels. Even then, even as she was dying, she was laughing and praising God. I drove straight to the police station in Fairbanks, but by the time they organized a response team and helicopters, the compound was already burning. They found partially consumed bodies scattered around the property, evidence of the cannibalistic rituals, but most of the community had escaped into the wilderness. Emma's body was never found among the ruins. Sometimes I get packages in the mail, unmarked boxes containing strips of what looks like jerky with no return address. I know she's still out there with the other survivors, probably starting a new commune somewhere remote. The worst part isn't the nightmares or the therapy or losing my job because I can't drive those remote routes anymore. The worst part is knowing that Emma chose this. She wasn't brainwashed or forced. She genuinely enjoyed eating human flesh. In her final moments under my truck, she was smiling and chewing on a piece of raw meat from her latest victim. I've seen missing person reports from areas where the survivors fled, and I know they're rebuilding their cannibal congregation somewhere. Sometimes when I deliver to remote religious communities, because I still have to work, still have bills to pay, I wonder if I'm feeding another group of human predators. The taste of that tea dinner still haunts me, because now I know it was probably someone's missing child, someone who had a family that loved them and is still looking for them. And the part that keeps me awake at night, the part that makes me hate myself, is that in those few bites before I knew what it was, part of me thought it was delicious. God help me, it was delicious.